Alright, so in problem number 1 in this section, we're going to find the principal values for x. And for the principal values of x, anything that has cosine or secant has to be, the answers can be anywhere between 0 and 180. And for any of the other 4, we're going to get answers in between negative 90 and positive 90. So in problem number 1, or example number 1 here, I'm going to do 1/2 cosine x equals 0. And we're trying to find the principal values. And we will do this in degree and radians. So that if you have problems, we can do it with both. Now, because they both have a cosine of x, we are going to factor that out. And so sine x minus 1/2 is left inside. And that's how we would factor this, because they both had a common factor. Now I'm going to take the first factor and set it equal to 0. And I'm going to take the second factor and set it equal to 0. So in my calculator, if I'm on degree and I do inverse cosine of 0, it will give me the answer of 90. And that's my first answer. Over here, I'm going to add 1/2 first. And I get the sine of x equals 1/2. And when I do the inverse sine of 1/2 in my calculator, it will give me the answer of 30 degrees. Now, if I want the answer in radians, I'm just going to I'm just going to convert these into radians, which is pi over 2 for this one, and 30 over 180 turns out to be 1 over 60. So these are my answers for radians. For degrees, my answers would have been 90 and 30. Alright, in problem number 2, we're going to do a different problem where you can either say the answers are in between 0 and 360 or in between 0 and 2 pi. Now for this particular problem, we're going to have problems doing this because when we get to a problem like this, we have sines and we have cosines. So we all know that sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. And I want to get rid of this sine squared, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this subtract cosine squared to get sine squared by itself. And so sine squared equals 1 minus cosine squared x. So that means that over here, the left side stays the same. And on the right side, I got 1 minus cosine squared x. So when trying to do these problems where we have cosine squared, like when we had quadratics, I'm going to get one side equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 1, and I'm going to add cosine squared x. And so I got 2 cosine squared x minus cosine x equals 1. I'm sorry, equals 0. I made one side equal to 0. Now when we come back over here, this side I'm going to try to factor. And when I factor, they both have a common cosine together. And when I take out the cosine, we have a 2 cosine x minus 1 left inside, because that's really 1 cosine x. So we have the cosine x equals 0, and we have 2 cosine x minus 1 equals 0. So when I do inverse cosine of 0, it tells me the answer is 90 degrees. Of course, if the cosine is 0 at 90, It's also going to be 0 when we're pointing straight down, so I have another answer at 270. For the cosine, I got 2 cosine of x equals 1 divided by 2. So the cosine of x equals 1/2. And when I figure out where the cosine is equal to 1/2, I get the answer of 60. Now for the cosine, it's positive in quadrant number 1 and quadrant number 4. So if that's 60, my other answer will be 300 degrees. Now, if I wanted these to be in radians, I'm going to multiply each one of these answers. So my answers for radians will be in brown. So 90 times pi over 180 is 1/2. So pi over 2, 270 times pi over 180 would be 3 pi over 2. 60 times pi over 180 is pi over 3. And 300 times pi over 180 is 5 pi over 3. 1, 2, 3, 4 answers for radians. 1, 2, 3, 4 answers if we wanted it in degrees. Alright, so in this problem, we're going to try to find all of the answers. And we know that secant squared plus 1 is equal to tangent squared. So we have these 60s, and from last unit, tangent has a period of pi, which is 180 in degrees. So really, I have 60 plus 180n, and that would have been 120 plus 180n, where n is an integer. So going back through, we factored, we got this and this. We solved for 0. Then we found out where it was going to be in the plane. And then we got our answers. And if we needed this to be in radians, we would just multiply everything by pi over 180. And so my answers in radians would be pi over 3 plus pi n, and 2 pi over 3 plus pi n, where n is an integer. And that's the last section of chapter 7.